Welcome back to the Leaders Lab podcast. I'm your host, Ken Eslick, and today my friend Tommy Rosen is back with us. Tommy, if you guys have listened to the podcast, you'll know that he's impacted my life and the life of countless others along the way. Tommy is one of the pioneers in the field of yoga and in recovery, assisting others to holistically transcend addictions of all kinds. As the founder of Recovery 2.0, Tommy authored a book by the same name, which has become a bestseller in its category. I see it as a modern day manual for coping with any addictive behavior and for living a life on a path of discovery. The R2O community supports that path by providing universal meetings that are free, seminars, coaching, and online courses to help people live their best life. Membership in the R2O community is less than $1 per day. Trust me, it's the best deal out there of any kind, anywhere. And you can check that out at recovery2.0.com. Tommy also has a podcast called In the Circle, available wherever you're listening to this today. Tommy and his wife, who is an internationally renowned yoga teacher, Kia Miller, live in California, where they teach yoga and live life. So Tommy, welcome back.
Thank you, Ken, so much. I'm really grateful to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here. And as you know, what I want to talk to you about today is in your In the Circle podcast, which, by the way, if you guys have never heard this podcast, you might want to just press stop or pause on this one and go listen to that as a precursor to this, because, and you don't have to, I mean, one will kind of make sense without the other, but it might give you some really good context. So whenever you listen to it, before or after, I highly recommend it. But on that episode, it was released on December 19th. Tommy, you guys recorded it, I think, when you were in Costa Rica on Thanksgiving. Do you want to give us kind of an overview of what that particular podcast episode was about?
Yes. I would actually say that podcast episode was about a core teaching that is relevant and important for any human being who's looking to live a great life. And we would say, in the context of our recovery work and at Recovery 2.0, we would say that's a core teaching of Recovery 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do, in fanciful language, it has to do with levels of consciousness. In more simple language, it just simply has to do with the way that we show up in the world and the way that we view our situation, And so I can talk for a while. I guess you'll ask me to share the teaching, and as it's been shared with me, and I'm happy to do that. But basically, we're in Costa Rica on retreat with people, as we are around the world throughout the year. And the idea is to introduce people to new perspectives that can bring them onto a path that sets them free.
Yep.
Not at the end of the path, but every single day. And so this teaching that we released on the podcast on December 19th was actually, it was a Thanksgiving Day presentation. So it was really about thanks and gratitude and personal responsibility and blaming and complaining and all of these things that all of us are familiar with. So the teaching was about that. And it's something that I probably will be sharing for the rest of my life, because it's been so profound, of course, for me.
Yeah, it was amazing. And like I said, I listen to your podcast every week. You know, I'm involved in your community. I love it. I think it's great. I've read your book multiple times, and yet there was such a succinct, consolidated message and way to live life in that episode that I thought was so great. And I think that so many people, including myself at times, have been living in this state of, how come I'm not getting what I want? Things around me people around me aren't acting the way I want them to act like, right? If everyone would just do what I need them to do, then everything would be okay, right?
It sure would be.
Yeah. And so this doesn't, while this is based in recovery and a recovery seminar, this is everybody. This is the world, because to me, we all, the name of the episode was it called Why a Grateful Addict Never Relapses, I think, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. And it could also be called Why a Grateful Person always stays aligned to a path of discovery, right?
Yep,
So
exactly.
yeah, so it can apply to anybody. So to walk us through, I know this starts with, one particular premise when we're not in that great state of mind, and maybe you could walk us through what that is.
Okay. So actually, I would say this is the first level that I'm going to speak about, or the first. So again, fanciful language, but we'll
Yep.
break it down. The first level of consciousness, or the way that we perceive reality and perceive ourselves in the world, can be characterized by the words "life is happening to me." This is actually, from my investigation into human affairs in the world today, normal. We'll call this the place where most people are. Normal meaning this is what has become normal for our
Yeah, this is
society.
default mode, basically,
This is the
right?
default.
Yeah.
Yeah. The default is life is happening to me. Now, what that means is I am trained in my awareness to the external world, circumstances, relationships, people, places, and things. And like you said at the beginning, as long as I perceive that those people, places, and things are behaving the way I feel they ought to, as long as that's happening, things seem to be okay.
I've been there. It doesn't happen very often, unfortunately,
Yeah, that's
right?
an unbelievably rare moment. And
Yeah,
when it happens, you notice it because it's so rare.
right.
And then you do the worst thing possible, which is to try to hang on to it.
Yeah. You're like, "Oh, can they do it? I'll do it again tomorrow."
Yeah. And then it's gone.
Yeah,
So we look to the outside world for things to line up in a certain way so that our inner world can be contented.
right,
Actually, I believe all human beings are looking for contentment,
right.
joy, balance, love, belonging, sense of purpose, sense of mission, all of these things. I believe all human beings, I believe these are universal longings that we share.
Can we pause, not to interrupt, but can we pause for a second and
Sure.
just let's give some examples of, what people say or what they're thinking when life is happening to me as an
Sure.
example. Do you mind
So life,
sharing?
yeah, no, let's go right in. When life is happening to me, I am a victim by design. I am at the mercy of external circumstances. I am a victim of circumstances that I perceive to be beyond my control. That is to say, I'm in an incredibly disempowered place.
Mm-hmm.
Life is happening to me. I'm not in the driver's seat of my life. I'm in the passenger seat, and someone else, although I don't know who that is, seems to be driving. And so I have no agency. I have no power. I really feel powerless about the world around me. And that's because, to a great extent, we are powerless about the world around us. I know that I can't control another person's behavior, but I know I can control my own. And I know I can do things which influence and inform the way I show up in the world, so that no matter what's taking place, I no longer feel like a victim of those circumstances. But in this first level of consciousness, life is happening to me. There's a few behaviors that come up. If I'm a victim of circumstances that I perceive to be beyond my control, you better believe I'm going to be feeling frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm angry, resentful. At the very least, I'm wondering why things are not easier. I feel like I'm swimming upstream. And so those feelings and those experiences on a day-to-day basis form the conditions for me, the person who's stuck in that level of consciousness, life is happening to me, to try to explain to myself why this is happening. And I do that in two ways. One, I blame. I blame other people. Someone is responsible for this. Somebody who can I, point to that is responsible for what I'm experiencing, this feeling of being out of control, of being powerlessness, of being powerless. Yeah, so that's one behavior. I'm going to look for someone to blame. The other behavior is I'm going to complain. Those two pretty much sum it up.
Yeah.
when we're in that place of life is happening to me, eventually we're working ourselves down a road of frustration and despair and despondency. And we need to be in this place of someone's responsible for this. And I need to complain about my reality because I can't take responsibility for it.
Right. And I
Okay.
think, for me, Tommy, I remember, and we still do it, right? I mean, that's the thing is like, even if you're aware of this and you're working on it, because we're human and we have brains, we'll go back there sometimes, right? We'll go
Mm.
back there. But I think the difference is the recognition. But when I'd say I was living there, when I was living in life is happening to me, there was a lot of, man, I mean, if I would just get the promotion that I'm qualified for and they wouldn't put this other person ahead of me, to me, magically that would solve everything,
Mm.
including stuff that had nothing to do with the promotion, like maybe my relationships or my health, or, because if I had the money from the job, I'd be able to work out more and all of this, and magically, that even sometimes when you get that, because you're in that mode, you're still in that mode, right? So every now and then you get a small win, but I think you default back to that wavelength. Yeah.
You're speaking about if then thinking.
Yes.
And so that's sort of the thinking pattern of people who feel that life is happening to them.
Yes.
So if something happens, then I can be happy, then I could be content, then I can relax finally, then I'll be living the life I'm supposed to live. Of course, when the thing happens, whatever it is, we find that that premise didn't hold true.
Right.
There's another reason that we're unhappy. There's another reason we can't relax. There's dozens of things going on in any second that could prevent me from being contented. And I'll build a story around those things and I'll find the next enemy or I'll
Right.
find the next thing that I need. If this can happen, then I'm sure finally I'll be happy.
Right.
So this we can intellectually understand that this is a way of thinking and living that leads to futility, pain, and suffering. And this standing character right behind me, for those who are not watching, there's a Buddha. There's a Buddha behind me, and that was pretty much the premise of the Buddha: is we're either going to be living or we're going to be waiting to be living. And I highly recommend the former.
Right.
So how can we live this life? We're going to have to break out of this way of thinking, of if then thinking. We're going to have to break out of blame and complaint. So here I will tell you a really brilliant story about how this teaching came to me, how it was gifted and downloaded for me. I'm sitting in India on the banks of the Ganges River. Spiritual, beautiful, the river flowing, very wide part of the river, big flow of water, big energy. I'm sitting there towards sort of sunset. Sun is setting. It's gorgeous and warm. And I'm sitting meditating next to my wife. Behind me, in an open air kind of studio, open air platform, is a teacher with several hundred people gathered to hear this person's teaching. The first words of his lecture were relent complaint. And I sat up out of my meditation and I kind of like immediately smiled, just like you did right there.
Yeah.
The second line of the lecture was, never complain about anything ever again. And I laughed.
Right.
I laughed at the audaciousness of such a statement. Not only had I never heard such a thing, but it had never come into my mind as a conscious practice to stop complaining about anything ever again. Okay. The third sentence was, you cannot simultaneously complain and be grateful. The two things cancel each other out. Now, I have used that word gratitude and those words grateful, gratitude many, many times as a person in recovery. in the 12-step rooms, we hear about gratitude and attitude of gratitude and how important it is. Never had anyone made the connection for me between the end of complaining and the beginning of gratitude.
When I heard you say that, Tommy, when I heard you talk about that, in my head, I equated complaining in my head, instead of it just being, oh, I'm complaining, it's I'm practicing anti-gratitude. Do you know what I mean? Like as a personal check, it's like, do I really want to go against gratitude? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So sorry, please continue.
Yeah, no, that's exactly correct. And I had never made that connection myself either. And so here was the great teaching that, well, for the next 2 hours, literally 2 hours, he spoke about gratitude, what it is, how to live in it, what the benefits would be if for someone who accessed the force field of gratitude, that energy of gratitude, what would life be like for that person? He equated the power of gratitude to the power of love. He said, love and gratitude neck and neck in the universe in terms of powerful experiences and powerful energies. And he spoke about how attractive, like a magnet, the energy of gratitude is. For someone who would walk through the world truly grateful, like that's a person who never ever has to worry about anything.
Sure.
They will attract to them the most extraordinary circumstances. And gratitude for the lay person, and I consider myself at the top of that list, gratitude can just simply sound like, thank you. Thank you. Like, it's not thank you, but it's not thank you, I wish things were different. It's not someday I'll thank you.
Right.
It's just thank you.
Right.
This is amazing. This is amazing. And then to come at life from that place. So I listened to that several-hour lecture, and I can honestly say it changed my life. Now, I've been working on the practice ever since. This is now probably 8 years ago. And when I feel like what I can report in from the field is I'm doing better at catching myself when I complain, when I'm got a problem, when I'm in that if-then thinking. So I become much, much better at noticing that just because it's in my awareness.
Right.
So that's also really important. Like, because we become aware of something, we know that it doesn't mean we're going to have perfection with the thing. But to be aware of it is part of the practice. Because if I can be aware of when I'm complaining, then I can shift, then I can do something about it. I can process through it, analyze what the problem seems to be or what I envision the problem is, immediately move myself to a position of power, meaning I'm here for a reason. I've created the situation. I've lent energy to be in this moment right now. There's something in the moment right now that's hard for me. Let me look at that. Maybe there's a lesson in here. Maybe it's a gift. This challenge I'm feeling, these hard emotions, these griefs or these sadnesses or these lonelinesses, maybe there's something to it that could propel me forward, help me become a wiser and more skillful person, help me become more content, more grounded, more helpful, more loving, more caring, more grateful. Now we're at the second level of consciousness. So if the first level of consciousness was characterized by the concept, life is happening to me, this next level is now life is happening for me. When I'm happy, contented, joyful, I get to be happy, contented, joyful. When I'm struggling around creative frustration, financial frustration, physical frustration, mental frustration, relationship frustration, whatever the thing is, it doesn't matter. The countless forms of ways that a human being can struggle. When I'm struggling, the directive is look at the struggle as a lesson for you. It's going to show you something. You can grow from it. You can learn from it. It's unpleasant, yes. cultivate the capacity to be uncomfortable for a little while
Mhm.
and learn what this hardship, this challenge has to teach you. Now, that is a quantum shift up from life is happening to me.
Can I slide in a question right here?
Of course.
So life is happening to me, victim, mindset, obviously, no control or very little control. You're waiting on external things to happen that are then supposed to make you have it, and they're not going to, right? So, are not usually going to. But what would you say to someone that there are people that have had really, really horrific things happen to them? I mean, look at what's going on in the world. We've got a couple of pretty major wars going on. We've got people that have been sexually abused, stolen from whatever. Is it fair to say that life didn't just kind of happen to them, or how does somebody? I look at some of the things I bitch about, and I go, relatively minor in comparison to everybody else. It's still my experience. It still counts, but relatively minor. Then I look at, oh my God, if my house was bombed or my family was killed, how does this apply then? How do you get
Yeah,
someone
well,
out of that?
yes. So life is happening
Yeah.
and it's complex. So let's take the situation. We'll take some of these horrible scenarios that we can all drum up in our mind and we'll look at them through the lens of this. The most sort of innocent human being that I can imagine who undergoes hardship is a child, where somebody abuses that child physically, sexually, emotionally, in whatever way. So life happened to that child. Absolutely. And they experienced something unbelievably painful, traumatic, damaging. And the question for that child will, as that child becomes an adult, will be, what now? How can I heal from this? How can I integrate what took place, process through, learn from it, not from the sense of I was responsible in some way. No, of course not. Those acts are they come from human unconsciousness. They come from human suffering. They come from human trauma. Traumatized people traumatize people.
Mm.
Hurt people hurt people. Unconscious people behave unconsciously with other people and create unbelievable suffering and pain. Now, that child, that defenseless child, is still in their body, alive in this world, and they're going to grow up. What we want for that child is healing or return to wholeness, an ability for them to process through it. We want them to say someday, I was informed by that horrible experience. No, I would not want to go through that. I don't wish that anybody else have that experience, but that experience was a part of my life and I'm free from it now.
And by being free from it, they're not a victim of it anymore, right?
They
They're
are no
not living
longer
it.
a victim of it. And I'm
Right.
not trying to say that that's an easy thing to attain.
Right.
Or belittle the trauma of it or the pain of it. What
Right.
I'm saying is me as someone who wants to help people not suffer,
Right.
I would have to take that defenseless child who's now in an adult body and I'd say, we're going to have to do some work together so that you understand this was not your fault, so that you understand how to put the pieces of your psyche, body, and spirit back together again, so that you don't remain traumatized by something that took place 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And so that you don't pass on that trauma to somebody else, like another child.
Yeah.
So we have wars going on in the world. There are people in those war zones that are managing better than others.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a statement of condemnation of one or another.
Right.
Eventually, we're going to have to heal,
Right.
or we just simply remain in a place of suffering. These rules apply to all human beings. It's what makes it a universal teaching. It's not my rule and it's not my teaching. Anyone can stay and justify themselves staying in life is happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
But they will suffer there.
Mm-hmm.
You can create, any of us can create a story. I, sexually abused myself, all kinds of stuff when I was little, all kinds of emotional problems, all kinds of challenges at every level. I can create a great story for why I should continue using drugs.
Sure.
I can create a story for why I should continue to be mean to other people, or be dishonest, or live a life that's not really authentic or truthful.
Right.
But if I create that story and I live that life, I will be miserable.
Absolutely.
And eventually, I will always feel it. And so there's some people who have the ability to build, really pretty profound stories of suffering.
Right. And
way beyond you or me.
Well, and they're legit. I mean, like you
Sure.
wouldn't go to someone that was, raped as a child and say, your feelings aren't valid. You'd be like, well, your feelings are very valid, of course, but now they're say 30 years old and this happened when they're 8, and you go,
Right.
well, your feelings are very valid. The
Yeah.
thing is it going to define your entire life now? Is that
We hope not.
right?
Now, lovingly, compassionately, we would say, well, I don't want that person to suffer anymore because of that thing.
Right.
What can we do? Now, Gabor Mate wrote in his book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, he wrote a story about a detective in Vancouver who worked on the police force. And this detective's job was to try to catch people who perpetrated child sex trafficking and child pornography. And the detective reports that he had to look at all these horrible videos of people abusing children so that they could try to find these people and put them in jail. That was this guy's job. And the conclusion that Gabor Mate made was 20 feet out the door of this detective's office, 20 feet down the corridor, was the narcotics division of the police force. And he said, in 10 years, those very same kids that this detective is looking at on the screen are going to be in jail for drug abuse, drug sales, and violence related to the trauma they underwent as children.
Yeah.
Now that's a heavy, heavy story.
Yeah.
So the question that we're really looking at is, well, before you ask this question, we're looking at our own behavior and the way we show up in the world. What do we carry? Are we taking responsibility for the reality we experience today? If we don't take responsibility for that and we blame and complain, it's very difficult to process and move through it to a better place.
Right.
All we need to, it's not that we're saying bad shit never happens or that it didn't happen to me.
Right.
It's the question of the person who is moving along a path of healing. Eventually they'll come to the question, how do I get free of this thing?
Yes.
Now, there's a war going on in Ukraine right now. 500,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of Russians. There's 17 million people displaced from their homes over there right now. And I can tell you that last year, 2 years ago, right in the middle of that war, There are 200 people in a yoga teacher training, most of them women, in the Ukraine, practicing and studying yoga in the middle of a war. Because to them, they want to live.
Mm.
They don't want to be dying, traumatized. They want to have a skill that they can apply to their own suffering and the suffering of whomever returns from this war. And I find that deeply moving. And that's an example of people who have said to themselves, I'm not going to be a victim of this thing.
Right.
I'm going to live my life to the fullest. There's a documentary coming out about those women called Yogis of Ukraine.
Oh,
You'll
cool.
hear about it this year. It's an extraordinary story and tale. And so I bring that up to say there are people that manage the most horrific situations with grace. And so we're in a discussion now of mindset that could move a person towards greater healing, greater presence, greater grace.
Yeah. There was this thing I heard, Tommy, long time ago, Oprah Winfrey interview of these two girls, two women at the time she interviewed them, probably, I'm guessing around 30 years old, that had some really horrific stuff happen to them when they were kids. These are twin girls, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and they were taken by social services and separated. You know how these talk show hosts like to do the big reunion. You haven't seen your sister in 20 years. One of them turned into a heroin addict, and the other one turned into I think a lawyer, something professional, had a family, life was pretty good. They asked both of them separately before they brought them together. God, with the upbringing that you had, how do you think that contributed to where you are now? Both of them said the same thing. With an upbringing like I had, how could I have turned out any different? The heroin addict said that because it's justified. And the other person said, obviously she used it as leverage and said, I don't want to go down that path. I don't want to live this way. And so she used it as leverage to have a better life. But really interesting. I mean, these are essentially genetically the same people, same age, same background, and been separated since the trauma and just took different paths,
Yes. And we can say, who knows what words were delivered
Sure.
by whom at the right moment or the wrong moment, in the right way or the wrong way, that turned somebody in a direction or influenced them or inspired them one way or another. And this is the complexity of human development. Like, we never know why one person turns out this way, another person turns out that way. What we have here before us is an opportunity. We can live life blaming and complaining. And it just, those of us who have been there, and I've been there, and have the awareness and the grace to recognize, wow, that didn't work.
Right.
There must be something more. And then you get around people. The minute you say to yourself, there must be something more, buckle up, because something more is about to show up for you if you're willing.
Absolutely.
And then a teacher shows up, or a book shows up, or an opportunity shows up, and you take it because you're ready for it. Something has bloomed within you and you're ready for it. And then you go down this path and you'll arrive at this place, not consciously necessarily, but I'm only speaking about it consciously because of the teaching that day in India.
Right.
That brought it into my conscious mind. It might be a good idea for me to think about not complaining anymore about anything.
Sure.
And then the teaching reveals itself as you go down that path. The next revelation was, if you didn't complain and you didn't blame anybody, who could you hold responsible for your life? Only you. Now, again, you'll come back to that same question, but what about the child? What about the defenseless child? It's an unbelievably horrible, unfortunate thing that took place, but that defensive child is now a wounded adult.
Right.
And so we want to do everything to help that wounded adult heal and come to this understanding that I can take full responsibility. I can develop the ability to respond well to my life today, regardless of what took place for me in my past. Now, no, I don't expect someone who's terribly wounded to just all of a sudden adopt that frame of reference.
Right.
It comes over time through blood and sweat and tears and talking and loving. And hopefully you're surrounded by caring people who understand. But these are important ideas for us and anybody who is ready to consider humbly, like, how can my life be better? Well, it can
So,
be better when we take full responsibility for this life and this day in front of us right now. If I'm feeling sad and wounded, that's okay. I'm going to do everything I can to look at it, sit with it, learn from it, talk through it, process through it, and bring myself to a better place of understanding of what this life is supposed to be for me beyond this pain and beyond this sadness or whatever the emotion might be. Life is happening to me. Old way. Life is happening for me. New way. So now I'm in the driver's seat of my life. Now I have power to do something. I'm not waiting for someone to come and apologize to me. I'm not looking to the external world for the solution to my inner world feelings.
right.
This is a big, big quantum shift, and it lasts many, many decades for people. Those who are lucky enough to even think about living in such a way, who take full responsibility for what they are experiencing. And there's levels beyond this. There's levels beyond this. The next level that I love to just present, and that'll be the final level maybe we talk about today, but when you move even beyond life is happening for me, you get to life is happening through me. That again is a quantum shift in understanding and in the way we show up. When life is happening through us, now we're in line. You might say we're in the employment of spirit.
Mm-hmm.
We're now going to have to talk about spirituality, what some people refer to as the spirit or higher power or God, nature, or whatever your concept of that, the universe. Because when life is happening through you, you have this sense of being used in the best way,
Mm-hmm.
like being put to work in the best way, like being in the employ of the infinite, if you will. Again, fanciful language. But there's intuition that goes through the roof. There's a sense of flow, being in that peak state that we many of us have experienced in many, many different ways. But being in that sense of, I live for purposes and for reasons that are beyond my own needs,
Mm-hmm.
beyond my own cravings, beyond my own stories. I'm living for something greater than just my own existence. And it's like you walk around on the planet and there's a sign on your head that says, open for business.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that, I know for me that when you have that sign on your head, you're going to be put to work. And sometimes it's incredibly joyful and sometimes it's incredibly difficult. So that's not to say, as we move through these levels of understanding, these levels of awareness, that life all of a sudden gets easy all the time. But there is definitely more ease, and there's definitely more flow, and there's a big shift in understanding of what we're doing and why we're here doing it. And life takes on a great meaning and a great purpose.
I noticed, Tommy, when I got to a point where I feel like my home base shifted from life is happening to me to life is happening for me. It wasn't like day one, but I'm saying, like, as that became my home, then occasionally I felt like life was happening through me. You know what I mean? It'd be like, whoa, wasn't expecting that. You know what I mean? And the longer you're kind of in that vibe, in that vibration, I felt like the more often it happened.
Mm.
So then I started looking for, well, okay, what's the recipe for me staying in that? One is being aware of complaining. One is being, for an addict, might be attending meetings, getting out in nature. For anyone listening to this, it's whatever I think gets you to the real you, the best version of you, right?
Mm.
Um, let's say for life is happening to me for a minute. Because I'm guessing with your intuition and your experience in this, right away, I'm guessing, when you meet somebody, whether not that you're judging them, but I think by the vibration that they're putting out and the things that they say, you're kind of like, wow, that's life's happening for that guy, right? Like you can see it. What do you see? What are some of the characteristics that you see in people?
For people who live in such a way that life is happening for them,
Yes. Yeah.
well, I see various stages of that sense of gratitude in them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not complaining and blaming.
Right.
They're they are expressing stories about themselves that they're not any longer gripped in. There's not a um, sort of a general sense of stuckness about them.
Right.
Like there's a freedom and an idea, and you know, things are generally speaking, going pretty well in their life. However, I want to caution anybody who just heard that statement that it's difficult to be human in certain ways. And the difficulties of being human are lessened through right understanding,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not removed. They don't disappear. We will experience loss in our life. We will lose people that we love. We have lost people that we love. And we know what that feels like. And we know that the longer we stay here in this body, we will lose more people. And that's very difficult. We will have successes and we will have failures. And that's difficult. We will stick around and maybe long enough to see this body lose some of its sheen, some of its ability. And that's difficult. We're in a portal where things decay here.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. So all of those things are, very real. And then there's the extraordinary things that happen when human beings go unconscious, like war, famine, inequity, social injustice, all of it. Those are hard things. We see someone else's pain, we can take on their pain, even though we may not be able to do a thing about it. We now live in this hyper-connected world in a certain sense, where we're aware of people's pain far away and we're aware of it second to second if we want to be. So this is like very, very difficult to be a human being. What we're talking about is a recipe for becoming better at it, more skillful, more centered, more helpful, more compassionate and kind, more loving, more grateful, and more joy to just be alive. That's the ticket for most of us. And anybody who is listening to this seriously and considering these ideas, these are not pipe dreams, but they are a pipe dream for the person who waits for the external world to solve the problem for them. That's where yoga comes in. Yoga, in the broadest sense of that word, simply meaning the person who turns their gaze inside to see what's really real. That's it. That's what I mean by yoga.
Right.
So the union of mind, body, and spirit, the union of finite with the infinite. Without that practice, and I don't mean the exercise, I mean the life path of yoga, of this self-inquiry, community, study of texts and important words, study of our own life, and practices that really bring us up against our own resistance so that we can grow. That's the path of yoga. And so I advocate for it strongly.
Mm-hmm.
And, for people in recovery from addiction, which for me, by my definition, is now everybody, and I mean everybody's in recovery from addiction.
Right.
If you didn't think you were before the pandemic, now you know. Okay. It's anxiety, it's stress, it's depression, it's overwhelm. Maybe you're using substances, maybe not, doesn't matter. You're asking the same questions we're all asking. How can I do better? How can I heal? How can I become whole again? And that's where yoga comes in. Everything we're doing right now, you and I, this is yoga here. This conversation is yoga.
Right.
Because it's moving us into hopefully into greater clarity, moving from the dark to the light, confusion to, crystal clarity. So this is yoga. We need this.
So, Tommy, what I'd like to do here, we're going to continue our talk, but folks, we're going to wrap up this week's episode. And on next week's episode, we're going to go part 2 with Tommy. And Tommy, what I really want to dive into on the next one is the identity that we create from these stories that we have, and how do we break through that? Because we get very attached to our stories, right? And we don't want to let them go. And then we'll take it from there wherever it's going to go. So thanks again, guys, for joining us on the Leaders Lab. Tommy, thanks for being
Thank
our
you,
guest.
Ken.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
All right, welcome back to the Leaders Lab. My name is Ken Eslick. I'm your host, and today on the show, Tommy Rosen is back. As you guys know, Tommy has impacted my life and the life of countless others. Tommy is one of the pioneers in the field of yoga and recovery, assisting others to holistically transcend addictions of all kinds. As the founder of Recovery 2.0, Tommy authored a book by the same name, which has become a bestseller in its category. I see it as a modern-day manual for coping with any addictive behavior and for living on a path of discovery. The R2O community supports that path by providing universal meetings, which are free, seminars, coaching, and online courses to help people live their best life. Membership in R2O is less than $1 per day. You can check it out at recovery2.0.com. Tommy also has a podcast called In the Circle, available wherever you are listening. And today's episode, part 2, is really based on an episode that Tommy recorded back on Thanksgiving, released it on December 19th. It was entitled Why a Grateful Addict Never Relapses, but it was really all about living consciously, I think, and coming from a place of gratitude. So welcome back, Tommy.
Thank you so much, Ken. Grateful, as always, to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So when we last talked about it, you were talking about, we started getting into, yoga being the path, right? Looking inward as being the path, and to change, right? To making progress on this path of discovery. But I also mentioned as we were closing, what prevents, what, in your opinion, like what, I think people get so, and when I say people, let's just say me, I know that I have been really attached to, I didn't get this, my mom did this, my dad did this, and almost to a point where I was fearful, like if I'm not that, like if I've been saying that for decades, for every time I want to cop out or a free pass or can't fulfill my promises or whatever it is, and I'm not using alcohol or drugs to medicate or anything else, like all that's left is for me to face me. That didn't sound too exciting at the time. What do you see in your line of work when it comes to people holding on to their identity and their stories?
Yes, great. Well, so I came up in the 12-step rooms in the first, in my recovery, that the 12 steps and the community there has been, central and instrumental in my recovery, particularly at the beginning. And there you would sit in circle, and everybody, much to everybody's benefit and surprise, we got to learn firsthand that just by listening to other people with similar experiences and by being willing to share our own experiences honestly, that had a healing effect, powerful, healing, transformational effect on our life. And we would sit in that circle and we would listen to stories and we would tell stories. And you could tell the difference between someone who was telling a story that they had learned from and were liberated from, were no longer gripped in their story, but they were speaking from a place of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
They had learned something from their story,
Mm-hmm.
and they were now in a place of being free. You could tell the difference between that person and the person speaking who was telling their story and they were still gripped in it, still stuck in it.
Yes.
It was, I mean, you couldn't, from a certain perspective, you couldn't miss it. You couldn't miss the difference because the energy was so markedly different between those two deliveries. And we're talking about every kind of human being, every gender, every race, every creed. This cuts across, this is universal, just as universal as addiction. So are all the issues of humanity, and so is our recovery issues and all this. So we're talking about everybody here. And so then the question was, we might go out to coffee or something after a meeting, and we'd be with that person who just shared their story from a place of, say, anger, or they shared their story from a place of resentment. And you would sit with them and you'd begin to sort of hear what had happened. Yes, they were in the energy of what happened to them. Someone had done them wrong. Someone had mistreated them. There was an injustice that's taken place. And we would kindly, as warmly and truthfully as possible, help them in the sense of saying, yes, this is unfortunate. Or, wow, that sucks. I'm so sorry that happened. Or, wow, that person really, what an asshole. I can't believe they treated you like that. But the effort was always towards acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it did happen. Now what? Okay, so your parents didn't behave in all cases, or in many cases, the way you thought they ought to. They did things that were hurtful, unconscious, unskillful, in some cases mean, in some cases violent for people. Yeah. Yes, that's unfortunate. Unfortunate for them, unfortunate for you. Now what? Because I could sit with that person at coffee after the meeting who's angry about the thing that happened that week. But there was a level of energy and a level of hysteria that went beyond the thing that took place that week.
Sure. Yeah.
And as Nikki Myers likes to say, who's an incredible teacher and colleague and friend, she says, if you're hysterical, it's probably historical. Right? There's probably, it's tracing back to something that took place. And all that means, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means that there's something as yet unresolved in your psyche, in your memory, in your body, in your spirit that took place that somebody just triggered for you. And now the job is to learn, wow, I am triggered. Why am I? What is this about for me? God, I'm so uncomfortable. I'm so angry. When this happens, I get so angry. Okay, what's that leading? Where's that coming from? How can I do better? How can I not be angry and be triggered and be in this very painful state when these types of things happen? Bigger question, why does this keep happening to me?
Right.
The person will ask, well, it isn't happening to you. At this point now, maybe not as a child, but at this point now, you're showing up in the world in such a way that these things keep coming.
Mm-hmm.
We participate. We do. Ken, we do. We participate in the unfolding of our life.
Of course.
You say, of course. And so many people don't get that because they're still in life is happening to me. In life is happening to me, I don't participate in the unfolding of my life. I react to the conditions of the world around me.
Yeah.
All I can do is react. I can't forge a way forward. I can't create. Human beings are creative by nature. We're so creative by nature. And when we don't create, the feeling that comes from that is frustration.
Mm-hmm.
We don't feel powerless. We don't feel powerful. We feel powerless. And so we, in order to participate in our life, we have to get out of reactivity into activity. How do I want things to be? Well, different than they are. Okay. In order for you to get different results, you're going to have to do different things, say different things, act different ways, be around different people. The reason why someone listens to the Leaders Lab is because they get exposed to different ideas about what it means to be a leader in the world. And I can tell you that you can be you can be a successful business leader and go home at night and be miserable.
Sure.
And that's just not what anybody thinks in our society is possible. Because most of the if then is if I had enough money, power, prestige, approval, attention, then I could be happy.
Right.
And then you see these people with money, power, prestige, and approval, and they're insane.
I was heading
And
there, Tommy. I was, you know, I got so hung up with titles and paychecks and, to where I remember at one point telling my boss, I don't even care if I get the raise, give me the title. Like it meant something to me in our little ecosystem. You know what I mean? Um, but I had had many titles before and they never really solved anything, at the time. So when I say this and when I say, of course, life is unfolding for us, of course, for me came in my 50s, so I don't say this from a place of judgment that anybody for anybody that is in that mindset, but simply that, I've heard you say, life at minimum or your accomplishments at a minimum are a co-creation. And you don't, somebody doesn't have to believe in God or a particular religion or anything to just understand that there's something greater than you at work. And I think, related back to what we're talking about right now, it's like, well, if I do believe that, and I'd rather dance with that energy than push up against it, right?
mm,
Or repel from it.
mm,
And I think as soon as I could kind of get in flow with that type of energy, the benefits were huge. One thing I wanted to say too is for any of you that are going, okay, this is hippy dippy, universal bullshit, like whatever. It's like, okay, just look at it this way. Forget about the universe for a minute, forget about God or whatever else you want to put out there. And let's just talk about the human mind for a minute. I think it's uncontested that we are kind of manifestation tools in a way, in that our minds are geared to keep us safe, right? And our minds are geared for certainty. So our minds really, I think, are hardwired to make us correct in what we believe to be true. So if we have negative thoughts all the time, thoughts about like, oh, Jesus Christ, if I just get the promotion, if my wife would just do this or that, if my kid wouldn't, whatever, then your mind will literally go to places to make that happen. And I think same with the opposite side. If I'm in a life is happening for me mindset, hey, whether I get this deal or the next deal, the deals are going to happen. It's fine. Uh, my relationships are going to be good because this is a bump in the road. I'm going to show up the way I need to, or I'm going to learn from what we're going through right now. Your mind is constantly looking for evidence I think, to prove itself, right? To prove the thoughts. And so, um, all of this combined with that, it's like, it's a good idea, I think, to believe in a higher power. But if you just understand how we are wired, all of this still makes a tremendous amount of sense.
Sure. Well, I mean, forget about having to explain or try to get into the debate about the existence of God or spirit, or, there are things going on that are beyond me. I mean, it's very simple. I'm looking outside of my window right here at a tree. Like, first of all, I didn't plant the seed even for that tree to grow, but I don't have the ability to make a tree. The only thing I could do if I wanted to have a tree, I'd have to find a seed. I'd have to find some soil. I'd have to make sure that the seed grew in a place where the sunlight hit, and there'd have to be water. So the very best I seem to be able to do in this analogy of gardening is to set the conditions which are favorable for something to take place. But I can't claim, even if I did all those things I just spoke to you, like growing tomatoes. I have a vegetable garden. I love to grow tomatoes. I could never pick a tomato and be like, look at my tomato.
People say that all the time, though.
Yeah, but that's just like,
You
look what showed up.
You facilitated the
I
growth
did.
of the tomato, but yeah.
This tomato doesn't exist with me alone.
Right.
There's something else going on there that I can't conceive of it.
Right.
And so that's all I'm saying, is that it's the same way with almost everything. Architecting anything, growing anything, living a life. I mean, right this minute, you and I, neither one of us until this moment have thought about our heart beating in the center of our chest.
Yep.
But there it is. Something seems to be powering the system here, and it's not me.
Right.
It just isn't me. I'm not consciously doing that. I'm participating with an energy that seems to be operating the cells of my body and all the systems of my body and my brain. And even, like, I don't even know where these words are coming from right now, but they're coming because here we are together, and this is me, and this is you, and this is my intellect and my experience. And all of this is beyond just me.
Yeah.
So that's all I need to understand for myself, to ask myself the next key question. If I'm looking for more power, how can I tap into it? And how are the stories I'm telling myself helping or hindering that process? So if I'm living in life is happening to me and I'm out here blaming and complaining, it's her fault, it's his fault, it's their fault. If you hadn't done this, everything would have worked out okay. I can't believe how you are. The chance that I'm going to be interacting in any kind of productive way with the energy or the force that I'm describing to you are very, very low.
Right.
When I move to life is happening for me and I slow down a minute and I literally open my eyes and I say, okay, what's going on here? What am I feeling? What just happened? Where's the pressure coming from? How can I alleviate it? Gosh, I feel lonely. Who could I call and connect with and express this loneliness? Humbly, honestly, vulnerably. Wow. That's not thought of as a masculine thing to do.
Right.
And so a lot of men, unfortunately, and of course women too, but a lot of men would prefer to stay lonely than to connect with somebody. and just say, wow, I feel really off. I don't feel well. Like things are happening and I don't understand. Could you sit with me and talk me through it for a minute? Like to me, that's a superpower.
Sure.
That's how it happens, for people as people help people. So what are we doing to be in the connection with whatever's necessary to live this life to the fullest? And so, I mean, you brought up spirituality. So, I mean, the spiritual aspect of life is part of that. You don't have to be all, namaste. You don't have to be all, oh, that's for people who want to do that. That doesn't change the reality of what's going on here. And so our effort is to try to tap into that reality in a deeper and more truthful way. That's it. Our stories tend to get in the way. Our memories tend to get in the way. Even positive memories get in the way. So we have to work that out.
You know what I've noticed with my stories and some other people that I've worked with too is that they're not even usually accurate. It's like watching a traffic accident that happened at a four-way stop and you're looking at it from one angle and writing the whole report, and it was embedded and you were 8 or 9 years old or whatever. And it's like, I think we get so afraid of losing our stories because if all of that shit that I've been blaming for however many years, if that isn't true, then holy shit, some of this might be on me. And who am I without the story? Because as much as people say they hate being a victim and all of that, I think we get very attached to our stories. The same way people are in bad relationships and won't leave because, it's who am I without this, right? And we see it, I think, in the recovery community. You see some people like blossom like a flower in their first year and kind of stay there and grow. And I've seen other people for 30 years talking about the same stuff, right? For that
Exactly.
long. Yeah.
Yep. Well, I would say to people that what I usually say is recovery is evolutionary or it's not recovery.
Right.
I could say the same thing. Life is evolutionary or it's not living. I mean, we are on a process of evolution. That seems to be the thing that we all actually do understand and do agree on.
Yeah.
That everything is changing all the time. But interestingly, the drug addict, the alcoholic, the sex addict, the codependent, the money addict, the shopping addict, the gambling addict, the technology addict is using these behaviors to try to feel better. And they have the unusual side effect of stopping our personal evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And since we are in an evolutionary universe, to live in a stuck way is unbelievably painful. Right. And that's why I think why we're having this conversation.
Yeah. I think that, and in some ways, I think a drug addict, an alcoholic, whatever, that finds not abstinence, because forget abstinence. There's no joy really in abstinence by itself. Abstinence is a gateway, I think, to allow you to then receive information that if you take action on it, you can do something different with your life and maybe live in a place where life is happening for you. But in a way, it's a gift because most of the population we're all addicted to stuff. Your behavior to your addictions, to your emotional addictions, to your story or whatever might manifest itself in anger, might manifest itself in shutting down, might manifest itself in raiding the fridge, might manifest itself on just being an asshole to everybody that you're around. But none of those things are labeled as addictive behavior, even though they're rooted in the same thing. It's just a different response. And so I think for addicts, as we coin them, they can go, well, they or the universe kind of goes, hey, this is too much. You've got to get help. And they have access to the material that's actually going to help them with the rest of their life. One of the reasons, in addition to just loving you as a friend and how much you've helped me in having you on the podcast so much, is I believe that the material, or particularly the way that you teach it, should be out to everybody.
Mm.
This is not, I think I even tried to try to talk you into changing the name from recovery to something else, because I'm like, or I think you were already going down, but at some point you were talking about like Life 2.0, because I was like, this is a self-improvement path.
Yep.
It's not an abstinence path. It's a
It's tough.
self-improvement path.
Believe me, we think about this every day in Recovery
Yeah.
2.0. Like literally, we talk about it every day. And it's like, because we have decided to connect with this group of people who understand that they've had addictive issues in their life in some way, shape, or form, then our job is to try to connect with those people who already understand that.
Yes.
But our much bigger job is to explain to everybody else, you are that person.
Yes.
You have, because you're in the human condition, you need Recovery 2.0.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it is. And so, we, from a marketing perspective, we've got this challenge because we're communicating specifically to people who have had similar experiences that I've had,
right,
with addiction.
Right.
But I so appreciate you saying that this is a life path, and I feel the same way. And I know, I've had, my sister just came on retreat with us in Costa Rica, and that was her comment. She's like, oh, this is just about how to live an amazing life.
That's it. That's all it is.
And that was coming from someone who doesn't identify as a person who struggles with addiction in any way.
Sure.
And so that was funny. That was amazing to hear that from her. Oh, you just have found the ways to live a great life, and you're sharing that with people.
That's it.
I'm like, yeah, that's cool.
For those of you out there, if you are interested in living a better life, definitely check out r2o.com. It's amazing. I've learned so much from you, Tommy. Thank you, as always, for being such a great friend and a mentor and a teacher.
My pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Say hi to Kia for us.
I will, Ken. Thank you so much.
Thanks for jumping on again.
Say hi to Shannon.
You got it, sir. Take care.
All right, man.